Hello. American parents and students peer. I make the answers appear so clear. Boxing's floss people. So okay, how are you people? Oh, this is about Connecticut campuses. This is serious stuff. I did that because I don't know how to get viewers on. I had nobody to hear when you speak about facts. I mean not facts, better than facts. When you speak about six sequence shifts, people attach you to conspiracy theories and they self-value roles with police firms. They don't know the extent of it, but they know to an extent they had to hide lie progressions. They need to hide the actual motivations, which is relevant to where and how. Those motivations at those locations, science and correlation shows they have to hide lie progressions for where and how they've entertained premise treatments, fact treatment nature qualities and aspects, the denial of the value of exceptions and exception nature truth. So the January 6th Commission, for example, and the 9/11 Commission is involved with like people associated with the Joshua Stryker from Trinity College, who was planting evidences with people of grades above me and below me about me, attaching me to fake words with themselves, fake ties to themselves, fake natures of ties to themselves. And with Joshua, and with people that they put in classes with me to make where they or exceptions and exception nature are relevant. Also relevant to what is bullying. So you guys have not, you have only heard the sciences on abridged. They were self-valued abridged by victims who blamed on other things, others or selves. For example, that which put black sickly distinctly and Native Americans sickly distinctly as the syntax stewards of ourselves, as the stewards of the over hierarchical opinions slash convictions slash delusions originally still forced. So they've been doing this with conjunctions between it relevant to where and how. Apparently they share, you know, they share roles with psychology, and psychiatry has all kinds of physical delusions juxtaposed roles with juxtaposed natures of organized crime, not just at those locations, but at all other locations. Now they've been getting away with it because other doctors and their family members and judges simultaneously and police firms have been fabricating evidences at locations, also with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. So there's someone on the FBI's wanted list. They said she was dragged to her death on the corner of Jordan Lane and Ridge Road. And there's a Mark Violet and Mike Violet also on Zion Street. There are people with the military involved with black and white families with the military and with KKK themed black family themed roles with medical racketeering, with predicate acts, whole bunch of uses of a juxtaposed natures of organized crime. For example, against each age of fact treatment nature, multi-front, originally instilled to keep out not sickly, non-distinctly everyone would has been this method knew that we would discern how Native American rights and how black people's rights when you discern them differently. There's a psychopath at the hierarchy of the law that is still breaching method being having been applied. So there's even worse psychopath breaching method, and that had already been implied. The locations, areas, in the states of the countries that were remote, that were associated with the remote possession of the colonies, and so still as the states, because our founders still had to hide then. With now, we have known, but we have offensively prevented the uses of it. All you have to understand about American history too, demonstrably, because they have the people who have the most knowledge about American history, using it to get over on people based on common sense that shows their criminal insidiousness. Criminal insidiousness nature of positive and negative treatments were in collusion per the methods that forced those crazy laws. And that means the value, in other words, everyone now is a syntax nature, blaming the real causes of negative value nature, progressive action natures on other things. So even when they become and stay more other things, that was being and having been used remotely down to their individual finite individuals. So offensively, there are exceptions and exception nature that are being and haven't been denied consciously by Fox News, MSNBC, and by CNN, and by Connecticut News Media. NBC Connecticut News has rules with Connecticut FBI and interstates FBI with worse than criminal incompetence. For example, regarding uses of color treatments. So this is not to knock police. This is where and how each age of fact treatment nature came through campuses when you guys were the youngest age. That which was obligated to be spoken for and be speaking to be have, that was obligated to speak for and as the law. You have to speak for it while as it, because you have to know that it is greater than, it is more finite than what one could perceive. Any honest justice would know that there would be ways to figure out if they made mistakes, or even if they did make a mistake, but they were making positing other things as evidences into databases that were in the furtherance of even worse things that those people are doing. Originated stuff. Reagent fail. So the computer companies will not, admit the value of exceptions and of the time and positions they put upon us, and the physical delusions simultaneously. And they will use what wealth, great wealth, they were given at the expense too. With this game too, get a representatives from some like New York City, get some representatives of them, and then call it color and leave out how the breaching method put that and force the ground tactically denatured in the suburbs, let alone New York City, specifically because it knew it was going to cause negative value nature progressions, action natures. If you don't know that, you stack people on top of each other in New York City. Even if the people are wealthy, especially when everyone's not free like that, overtly / insidiously simultaneously, and roles were fit with that, and so they were on our manifest as syntax, nature, styles, opinions / convictions / delusions that are relevant where how they make simultaneous value treatments. So they get away with this by pretending to be against behavior. Oh, I don't like this because you said this about. They're offensively the same ones doing that. They've been planting evidences about that. That's why they end up getting stuck later when they try to use it. And that's what's having happened. So on off, when I was a kid, on off Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, they were involved with men and women that were involved with the natures of identity thefts and frauds instances on and off campuses coordinated. where they film things, they write where the kids are next to each other doing, as the people that are already criminally foreign influenced, as A through Z people. And that's where it's relevant. For example, where we have to address is increasingly relevant, increasingly valuable to the breaching method one way and to how to cause positive value nature progressive action nature is another way. The valuable how overtly / insidiously when people make opinions about how black and white got there, but Native American rights got there with the law, entertained with criminally foreign influence factor nature qualities aspects, physical delusions, how they get away with it. Oh, well, that's what the research says. They're offensively they were preventing what is hypercorrelative. They're preventing regular correlation from being used as evidence. And there are criminal ways to say, well, I don't see the evidence. Is the evidence we see. There's a reason we were supposed to have the right to remain innocent. The courts have been using the courts and the police forms, criminally foreign influence statutes with Russians. There's a Russian guy with the corner of Elm Street and Route 3, which goes by the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices, involved with this method that has people that from private schools and grammar schools, and if you go to a different school, they mix it all because they're keeping people with self-out uses of that being and having been replaced. The words of intelligence, the words of honesty. And for example, regarding things like emotions are demonstrably about the importance, the increasing value of what is simultaneous, actually true, what the value of sequence true actually is. So Fox News and CNN and MSNBC distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, they measure each other overtly / insidiously. Defenses of logic and counters to logic regarding uses of the phrase Black Lives Matter. And the breaching method, distinctly from other countries, distinctly from countries grouped, distinctly from everywhere everyone is. The breaching method, distinctly from that, measures and maintains people. Called self-cultivated, blame out other things other than ourselves, what it did, and uses effectively still for what has nothing to do with racism or color or anything like that. It put that there to maintain it. In other words, where it is, how could it, because it's what correlation could use. We have to be able to discern where and how our locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influence and delusions wrought. We have to have free speech to be able to do it at locations. The interbranch and their family members and people tied to them were already offensively at locations. And when they're not doing it, valuing it having been done. Pretending they're a little acting and influencing them, leaving out overt criminal enterprise, private ones, hundreds of countries. They offensively and preemptively were and are shown their needs to hide. They don't know the extent of what they did. You know, with their little putting fake things to collude with the illusion, like people from other countries colluded with people in my grammar school. People that went to schools and lived in houses next to it, at schools, in other words, through time. And there are uses of that relevant to what was brought up and all these names they keep bringing up tied to the principal child abusers campus and the narratives. They still haven't responded to me that over the phone. And so they've been using criminally foreign influence readings of statutes about, well, you can't sue over this, but they left out exceptions, exception nature. These are also people from inside the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan right before the World Trade Center attack. Wills posted and documents and presenting to the panel of court of judges right before the World Trade Center attack. Documents have been post-dated from inside the court. That proven left to a 2006 district court case in Connecticut. That was in Manhattan. This had been in Washington before in 02. And so, and the one in Connecticut leading up to that case, in that case, a whole bunch of people from my town have federal crime rules of juxtaposed natures of common. One of the things that is commonly are natures of identity theft, fraud, and slanders offensively and sequence shifts. And so they make and confessions rules because they use that and their uses of other people's names, where they lock little boys and girls where no one could tell the truth. So everyone self-values those things and the motivations apparently other, but even when they're apparently other, there's more to it. As complete possession of all identities of a ground sophistication / non-sophistication, where and how the sciences were and are bridged. So civil liberties, they frame things as what? The Constitution is supposed to be unabridged. That they tell people messaging or to make a policy as online companies, as internet companies, World Wide Web companies. They're doing that, having done that, because they have experts relying on experts individually grouped in together or bridged. So we must understand that in how slavery and torture is simultaneous in identity theft, fraud, slander against every single American and our founding parents. And we're going to do this to counter those people hurt the most by it. But to discern it, we have to use what is actually historical and archaeological evidences, properly, treatment. The suburbs, since before cars, were designed to cause negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures. Who denies this? There are also proofs of it inherent to their fact, nature, quality / qualities and aspects. And it is relevant to where and how we are manifest as syntax nature, and therefore as function / s actually. So the same people involved with computers and databases, crimes from the past, uncharged, but people that were before their federal criminals were caught for different kind of things, they're already involved pretending other people were doing those things. And with the interbranch, and with how they have demonstrably, there was a whole bunch of people tied to Joshua Stryker, who had and to people with the name Olson. I had nothing to do with the Olsons. On Zion Street, involved with Fred Grisey, also with people involved on the child sex offender registry that are, even if they made that up, they're actually involved with roles with even uses of how they have juxtaposed natures of abuses of each age, fact shaping nature, like on campuses. Abridged, no, because they need to hide life progressions to those spots simultaneously, because they needed to hide, and they kept and keep those spots, needed to hide the why and how, as more and more collusions at all ground locations like parks. So people leading up to the World Trade Center attack have been acted in the past to fabricate audio and video, like people. So in other words, we have to have someone to respond, and you can't call the police because they'll replace what's actually recorded, and they forge and switch names, and they introduce more names that way. They have crime methods that are criminally foreign influenced, individually grouped and together to where and how they have no means to complain about this, to where and how it is relevant to where and how I caught them uses of types of experts that respond to types of crimes, knowing that they are in the furtherance of those types of crimes. They're just doing their job, exploiting the identity ground, defenses of identity ground locations, names, and needs to lie, used for other originally and still. Boxings to Legion here, your name, refill. All train, be child tribes. We move in sense as tribes to keep the wheels of Legion, the hooves, great lives. Be child tribes. So in other words, all we have to do is have the civil rights follow that location. So if I had time means, I would put a website. In fact, I'll donate if someone puts it. Put a website for if and the donation will go. So for New York City, for example, and whatever city comes first to pick it up, and that's what you do. In other words, there's a whole bunch of ways you can catch the three branches of government: criminally, foreign influence, and hiding that. And that's in collusion with people at campuses A through Z. Victim predators. If you try to treat them as victims, they use logic that they could only get away with because of that. Really what's involved with that manifest. Blaming on other things, others, ourselves. That which our founders really left us to have understood and to tell, to teach, like about how they had to counter-extort the other founders, how those laws were in place the way they were to keep complete possession, self-value of each individual fact treatment nature, of their positive and negative treatments and their identity and title, and locations, voices, therefore memory. All kinds of motivations, natures, needs, interests that were bound by one everyone missed, and uses of it. It made those scientists self-valued victims, defending their logic abridged. So they call people names. In other words, and that is manifest at locations, areas, and states. In other words, the people who are supposed to be the sophistication call people names because they're not supposed to be furthering hearsay. But so they're increasingly needs to hide roles with evidence planting at locations, areas, and states. So all along Route 3 in Connecticut, there are families involved with the intelligence community, or with the intelligence community's roles with predicate acts, and with natures of identity thefts and frauds relevant to uses of campuses intercity through time too, and their police forms private also, and as their roles with uses of news predicate acts. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a police form, not a criminal. These are also news predicate acts that are attached me and others that were in the Manhattan, New York context, not right next to the World Trade Center attack, right before the attack in the Ninth Circuit Court, the one that had presented from inside. They post-dated documents from inside. That was proven, but afterwards took all the way up to 2006 to get into the 2006 district court case with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organization Act. um, also involved with people with the transition from Organized Crime Control Act into RICO, and with people with the transition with the who brought involved with them with the World Trade Center attack, and with the crafting of the Patriot Act and uses of torture, where and how they had rules with Kuwait against Iraq, and they have roles with Saudi Arabia against America, and Kuwait against America. And so they have all these countries. Of course, our country hurts other countries too, because the countries A through Z are fake integrity. So there's the messengers left who they knew would defend locations, areas, and states. They would defend the books, the Quran and the Old Testament. They would defend them out of sequence, increasingly. Or we would, or we would come. The only way we have to value, for example, you say, what's this have to do with religion? This is science. The first part of the Old Testament says all you have to understand is right up to here, where the sciences come together. They share an identity. I'm paraphrasing. And I believe that's before, where Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. So all we have to understand is to there. So I'm going to do that. Oh, in that debate, when people want to say, "Oh, entertain this," okay, then we have to take it a couple steps further. I'll take a step further and say that the names of the kids are about in the generation of what is hypergenerating, where and how each letter of the English alphabet also spells out a word, and that word also spells out a sentence. And this is relevant to the Trinity. But the Trinity is also relevant to its cipher, decipher. And it's relevant to the where and how people pretend others simultaneously about their motivations too, for pretending positive and negative regarding the first part of the Old Testament and the first part of the Quran, and where how right and wrong is not discernible. That's also, in other words, it's differentially too. In other words, there are exceptions, and is exception nature relevant to where and how people are only given A or B answers to questions. And it is increasingly valuable simultaneously, where and how there are a whole bunch of evidences, like looking at New York City. If you've ever been around New York City, a whole bunch of proofs that that worse than colonization, that was to colonization, affected its control. I mean, it's unfolding, and its defenses of the narratives regarding its unfolding, formally / informally, in collusion, criminally foreign influence, and delusions wrought simultaneously, specifically for the defenses of that as a nature that would offensively maintain for the breaching method, and no one allowing anyone else to counter to be a quality of fact keeping nature that could use to correlation nature's means and counter that which we were left to counter for our founding parents who didn't have free speech. So one must teach for all to reach the means to move the species body right. Boxing is might. We shot a box, we heard not one. Boxing is fun. So America, can you hear me? New York, Connecticut students and parents. This is what they've been doing. They've been investing the members individually grouped and together of each branch of government of exception nature tied to them. Simultaneously, overt criminal enterprises, simultaneously, private ones, simultaneously, hundreds of other countries, family members, representatives here, there, shared, each age of it through time already invested themselves as victim reactions and as victim predators also preemptively, because that is being and having been. One of the ways they get away with it, they have that arrays of types, of cultural types, where and how they measure and maintain, fake integrity, pretending other, distinctly from the breaching method that measures and maintains fake integrity, pretending other. They don't discern that. The fact sheets of nature and the defenses of them regarding the January 6th and the World Trade Center Commission, they're in the furtherance of collusion with the military, originally and still. So there's something like Ray Colillo and Tim O'Brien and Andrew O'Brien and their parents were involved when I was in grammar school with spreading lies of people from other classrooms and attaching me and them to fake locations, like a Rick C.M. Faglione. In other words, I don't know what they were pretending motivations, passion, because they were also involved with overt criminal enterprises. Even if they made that up, they have predicate acts roles timed with them, and private ones, and on-off cases, and on-off interbranch locations, intercities through time. So they did this with the there was a College View location and on Zion Street in the shadow at noon of a house with a crow's nest on top of it, where they reportedly used to shoot slaves in Hartford. And Trinity College used to be reportedly named George Washington College. In American history, you cannot understand accurately, for example, without understanding how which trial place in Wethersfield, Connecticut is right around the corner from where and how George Washington and the rest of our founders and our actual founders actually were, had to counter extort the other founders. They had to force them, they had to leave them entrenched with slavery. Also, they put forth a method. They put that as a delay, apparently, and they and then they counter extorted both sides to fight with each other as fact sheet in nature about the law. And so they forced them to fight against slavery, but there were still roles with it. There were still roles with psychology with it. The jobs, it's not my fault. I'm just the guy that runs the whip for slavery. You see what I'm saying? Physical delusions at the same time. Control the mind. We need lawyers who follow mandated law at locations. We don't need lawyers who are going to be affronts to that, planting evidences, roles self-valuing how the FBI has roles recorded, replacing what's actually recorded audio and video over phones with fabricated emails, with child sex offenders, with families that run the phones for the police, for Wethersfield Police through time, calling things into themselves, all kind of methods of identity theft, fraud, slanders, having people, in other words, Chris Walters knows and is recorded, even if he's is dead or not, Chris Walters knows that his wife, I don't know, I mean his mother, and whoever, anyone who was at his wedding, that wedding was involved with some judges and with some prosecutors involved with this, and Wethersfield Police and interbranch locations. There are people on off Trinity College, on off Central Connecticut State University, have roles with those people leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since, and leading up to a Connecticut District Court case and since, with various natures of federal criminals, some of them who were the co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, in that part of a case/S that was ongoing at the time of my father's death. Three of his co-defendants and his lawyer had and has a whole bunch of roles with, and the kid of one of them, and the neighbor of one of them have roles with all these kids that were in my campuses. They also have roles with my town's police chief and with his daughter, Jessica Cintron. I was never in her presence in my life, and with Reno Mazzucato, he made an exception by having he came to a web school. Out when I was in the locker room there. I played football for like a year there, and the only reason I did that was because I was confessed. It was people with Jonathan Mile. I was involved with sequence shifts. He was involved hanging out with people. My neighbor, as one of the people that were attaching me to fake locations. I didn't even know who he was till after my neighbor graduated. They tried to paint exceptions, and there were none. In other words, in the 93/94 school year, that's when I first met him. So there's a Luigi Guerrero, and I don't know his sister's name, and I never had the pleasure of meeting her. I never had, but she, in other words. I just said, boy, so I remember she probably, I don't know what they told her about me, but they're involved with spreading lies about me, her brother, and Jonathan Mount, but also with judges, courts, and prosecutors, and as the people involved with overt criminal enterprises, all along Route 3, and with Town Line Drive Shopping Center. Now that's also with the Mike Levine involved with that, and with the policing of the campuses. And so there were a whole bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University who confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed that, there are police forms like associated with the Morrow families and people with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with federal crimes on child campuses through time. There's a Mr. Abruzzi, and there are kids with the narrative of there's a Millwoods Park that they've been using for identity theft. They put kids next to each other and take a picture of it. If they took a picture of me next to Mark Violet and one of those Corones, or both of them, I don't know if it was one or two there, and Danielle Perone and Jessica Levinskas one time, that was like, in other words, a couple times someone was going out of their way to make it look like they knew me there. And that's one of the times they did that. And they'll confess and demonstrate that, which is also relevant because those are the people involved with child abusers as adults who had roles being child abused when they were kids, and with locations involved, like next to Fox Connecticut News, next to WFSB locations, involved with wire crimes with them at their location too, with their news broadcasts, and with their pretending passions and emotions about their motivations, which are also involved with sequence shifts planting at locations as their roles also in cases where there are roles with predicate acts in the cases, with the worst patients and criminals, kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, find active progressive lies with them. So they have the military also, uses of Facebook, criminally foreign influence, readings of statutes, simultaneously delusions raw. So there's a scheduled family that pretended to know me also with the people with Middletown involved with her neighbors, and with like a DeMorrow family from Wethersfield as the ones with one in Rocky Hill Two, they're involved with the mobile gas stations on the South State Highway, with former Mayor Gold, other mayors, involved with fabricating evidences, involved with compromised uses of locations and like the rules with like ski places in Connecticut and stuff like that. In other words, with the narratives of people that would they try to make exceptions to, where they're slandering people. Oh, that was just a regular play date, and what came before it? You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's like an identity theft, but all these people's names got brought up too simultaneously. They are pretending I was bringing up their names. In other words, they put themselves as roles with this. There were judges and prosecutors using the locations criminally through time, but also as ones and police forms that are criminally foreign influence have been. So there's something to do with the Peruta family and Russians involved with all along Route 3 in the corner of town, Route 3 and Elm Street and the businesses near there with the name Cololo, with police chief Cintron and the Mazzucato Bakery there and where they used to be. And these are people that also told lies about me too, involved with this to a modern pastry. And or they hid this from, and they're trying to make them. They're using they influence them to hide their sense and sensibilities, real motivations juxtaposed with other real ones. But in other words, Fred Grisey too is involved with this, and people with Connecticut boxing gyms involved with body dumping spots, and the names involved with identity thefts and frauds tied to that, and uses of it that were time through time. So there's people. There's a guy, I don't know if anyone knows the name of John Scully. Everyone knows John Scully, a guy who was a friend of his, and there was some kind of a difference between him and the body and Billy Grasso. And there's the body dumping spot of a Billy Grasso, and there's two different ones that were reported in different media locations. But there's a body dumping spot of Billy Grasso that are Enzo Fienza and others. They recorded themselves. Then they confirmed on Facebook, for example. And they took my Facebook page away for other reasons too than they were pretending. These are people on and off the state judicial branch offices in Wethersfield, also through time with houses on and off 2-Route Highway, where it runs into Hangdog Lane, on off Hangdog Lane, having been planting evidences roles, wire crime acts roles with Wethersfield Pizza, sequence shifts, identity thefts and frauds, a Steven Stocco and a Maria Stocco or Maria Vizino, and a whole bunch of other boyfriends tied to her. And I never saw her on a campus in my life, except for Trinity, Central Connecticut State University. And that was where the Steven Stocco was also involved with that, with the intelligence community through time, with people like with people on my street and tied to them, involved with like a Jamie Smith and a David Smith also have roles with like some for them with like some selling of ecstasy as the families with the Wethersfield police phones. And they were pretending to know me at that time because I'd been away for years and I never had anything to do. Like a few times we played when I was in like first grade. It has something to do with roles with the fire department, plural, fire departments, and roles with this Joshua Stryker with houses at the corner of Fairlane Drive and Griswold Street. These are also people with the houses on the corner of a Scalora family is involved with confessions tied to that corner, and with their roles with identity thefts and frauds. Also with child sex offenders, like that Bob Chase said Phil Cololo was involved with. He was supposed to read me a police report, and he didn't read it when I was charged with harassment for calling back a whole bunch of answering machine left messages and confessions and statements you know, from a proven principal upskirt nature in Walmart. Now, even if they made that up, is involved with way worse then and now, and uses of juxtaposed natures of organized crime with the kids. There's a Brendan Leahy. He has a father, Brendan Leahy, and there are women with their family who work with Hartford Hospital. 3 times I went there. I never had a conversation with him in my life. I never had anything to do with him in my life. They try to pretend other with it. Rick Cianfaglione made confessions about him. I know what he's talking about. So there are people involved with New Britain Superior Court, a whole bunch of people involved with New Britain Superior Court, Hartford courts, involved with federal crimes with a Leahy family and a Cianfaglione family with families on my street as their roles with drugs and medicines crimes, with overt criminal enterprises, and with private ones, and with as their roles with uses of body dumping spots that were also timed. That is also evidential. It was also demonstrably connected to observable, critically observable things. The different news media was also directed to tell all these different lies. So these are the people that are involved with and as sources of CNN, involved with election crimes, because these are criminally foreign influence uses of town offices, and the narratives of politicians, where and how they've been roles with the lawyers of the FBI. Like with this Robert Cheverry, and locations around the state capitol involved with identity thefts and frauds through time, as the people involved with the O'Brien family and a Colol family with their confessions regarding modern pastry being involved with this, and I haven't been involved with it. And with the Wethersfield police, like 10 months ago, called me up and made confessions about their roles with the switching names. Too, a male officer said he was his name was Sullivan. That they confirmed it was one of their officers with the town offices that was using the town offices, and that it was they said only have a female officer named Sullivan, but there were other people involved with those town offices that before the 3 times they put me into the Hartford Hospital for mental evaluation, because I forced people without knowing why to call the police without telling them why. And I said I was going to be ignorant and yelled until they do it, because you can't record the police. I had to make them record themselves, and they did, because they recorded themselves before that with a Kevin Dillon who went like that and was like to my neighbor's house like that. And when there was the sale of their house with Anna Dillon, and they hid this from my neighbors too. Apparently, because they should have. In other words, these are people that are involved through time with Mike DeMay and with Adam DeMay. I don't know their parents' names, and their neighbors in that park, and people on other sides of that park involved with planting evidences relevant to their roles with people all along Route 3 and with other countries like South Korea, involved with drugs and medicines crime, with psychology tied to courts and tied to prisons, and tied to their physical delusions where they don't follow mandated law at locations or interbranch, because that is used remotely. It is relevant to where and how they are kept needing to hide lies. The same sequence shares final active progressive lives with their worst patients and criminals, and where and how that theater of fake integrity pretends that they don't realize all the evidence is that America is free in the context where it is free, and they pretend not to realize all the evidence that it is not free where it is not free simultaneously. So mandated law is not followed online because in collusion with criminally foreign influence readings of statutes they can't defend on paper, so they keep waiting for more problems to go down with locations, increasingly self-valuing how the needs of interbranch and exception nature tied to them, they have to have ties to all locations. They don't have integrity too. Where and how we don't have landlines, etc. This is a rat trap. Modern countries fake, pretend they could speak for the law. Please follow mandated law for them. If they want to sue, tell me who denies what I said. Connecticut Interbranch. They want to be sued. Someone said that I could sue, I should sue, but they're involved with names forging and switching, all that. So Hartford Hospital too. You have lawyer Hartford Hospital, other campuses in intercity. This is obviously interstate, but they have lawyers that have been roles with planting fabricated evidences, exploiting exception nature, and as their roles with physical delusions simultaneously. So as nature's relevant too, because they have whole predicate acts and acts methods relevant to this, and they still have roles with the police forms as the families that are involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Also, that as people involved with the coroners on South Dean Highway, like Town Line Drive and South Dean Highway, relevant too, and as ones involved with the names with the World Trade Center attack, and their time roles with juxtaposed natures of organized crime in the past, with confessions in context where returning to like a Mr. Neville put me in a middle school class with people that the courts and the police forms were trying to bring. I never saw them on the middle school class ever. There was one exception, real fast, with Joe DeMauro. So Joe DeMauro, Heather Hansen, and Ray Colal were with Mr. Neville. Involved also with some medical families, involved with the uses of Chris Walter, Rick Faglione. He also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, is involved with of Olsen brothers with identity thefts and frauds, and with people in the Spada family, also in the intelligence communities. They make everyone hate me because I have to use their names. They made strangers use my name, seek me out, knowing who I was, but I didn't know who they were. And I found out it is because it's tied to and so they attached me to all these fake ties to other people. They put fake police reports where the victims and the people perpetrating the crimes were in collusion with the judges and the prosecutors. That's what they've been, and those are the people who lied to my at Trinity College, fake conversations to me behind my back and online. And they have a Darth Vader involved. So Trinity College, please respond for whatever. I don't know, what did he say? Joshua Stryker, because he's one, and I want to know their narratives because they put me in Elizabeth in fake communications, fake natures of communications, and me with other people too, and the girl involved with a whole bunch of different abuses of her, from holding up from men and women and their kids, and her friends involved with that, like Heather Hansen. And then she's in the intelligence community now. They have their kids involved, the uses of other people's names. They can't go back and be honest about it after. They sought me out for that. They had those kids plant evidences as the ones involved with distinctly on campuses, from people just off campuses, and from ones that weren't even in my classrooms. They're trying to make exception nature. They use corners of hallways for all kinds of tricks, like fact cheating. They time where you're going to be, where you're going to look. These are the people. Heather Hansen's also involved with the daughter of one of the co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, with the people on Fox Connecticut News and WFSB leading up to the 2006 case. In that case, roles with predicate acts against me and other people, and as roles having been planting evidences since in other cases, uses of depositions. So they also have a DeMauro family and a McCord family had been planting evidences with lawyers. When I was a kid, there were lawyers planting evidences too. They don't care. They make sides with physical delusion, self-value, and criminally foreign influence roles, planting evidences for illusions and other natures of cases, and to keep the proper treatment, but the proper answers in cases from being revealed. They may have been making mistakes with how they've been charging people on purpose. They've been leaving it out, exceptions, the exception nature, that really to the value of their readings of statutes and precedents and their worth. They've been legislating from the bench, the same ones pretending that they're against that. They're all sick talking to each other because they're all sick from what I call in place of what we should learn and need to understand. So slavery can only is only natural as criminal insidiousness. Nature forces that. So follow mandated law, because I never had conversations with this Leahy family. Then they stack rolls with more names, and there's Anthony Yagman, who's one of the ones involved with no, they also have rolls with uses of their rolls with acid, with Anthony Yagman, and with other kinds of drugs with the people who and people involved with Social Security scam. Anthony Yagman also confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed he's involved with the Social Security scam. And there's people with Bloomfield or Kensington with the town offices, whatever, also criminally involved with them, and with some military families. And he's involved with, I never saw him on my street in my life. He's involved with people involved with my street and with the houses tied to them. It was nothing personal. They brought this up, the Wethersfield police, with their confessions, forging names, switching names. The police chief, and one years ago, before the Cole family moved into that house, also involved with this racketeering, this nature of, And so they have a Wydell brothers of a football team involved with the Cole family, also with the narrative with the O'Brien family across the street, involved with planting evidences with them, and as behavior crimes. And as these are some sick people as child abuses roles and as elderly abuses roles as the only identities of the law. So there's no way you can counter such. That's not science and honesty that spoke for our means. So we need to be able to use what is actually evidentially recorded. Like just with black treatments alone. Everyone leaves it out. Everyone measures and maintains its self-value left out, and everyone not realizing how that breaching method forced that. That's what force motivated it. And it had nothing to do. Where and how that has evidence to everything. There are revelations tied to that. Tied to every subject treatment. So we're not being able to use what is hyper evidential. And so it's only fake passions, emotions, and anger as criminally foreign influence, identity, the ground, locations, uses is allowed to speak or be heard speaking for color and what forced that in the law. Otherwise, they attach you to fake words and they get away with it. Anyone has heard as adults too. The news, they're making premises treatments not even real premises, and delusions wrought simultaneously, and they're pretending emotions, and they lie. Oh, well, they attacked us. We were just making opinions as Democrats, or we were just making opinions as Republicans, or we were just making opinions for the exceptions. Get down. They cannot follow mandated law at locations. They cannot have afforded their takes on the justifications to the readings of statutes and the relevance of the exceptions and exception nature. Here. So it means appear, the 10. I lead you right along. Come back again.